It's been years since I've talked about this, and I think it's worth bringing up again, just because this topic, in some way, shape, or form, comes up somewhat frequently. People talk about how to make a fist, how to punch correctly, all the time. And one of the things that we know from the motor learning research is that technique is not stable like it's on train tracks. Every rep of every single technique is going to be different. And there are some pretty big reasons for that. One is every time you do something, you are getting feedback from your performance and the environment that tells your body, your nervous system, to make subtle changes to do something about that performance, either to make it better, to maintain, whatever. Right? So you are going to be constantly undergoing changes in your technique, rep to rep, like individual rep to individual rep within the same set. This is a proven fact. They've shown this with with golf, with blacksmithing. Go look up repetition without repetition. Rob Gray talks about this a lot. It's a big deal, right? Now, some people take this to the conclusion that techniques don't exist, and I don't necessarily go with that, because I think that if you were to look at it the way that you look at a stranger tractor, say a Lorenzo tractor, which is a weather pattern thing, it's where you get this kind of infinity loop kind of thing for cycles. But the thing is that the lines never perfectly overlap each other. They always intersect each other. The thing is that if you zoom out far enough, you blur your vision and everything, you can still see that there's a consistent pattern. It's just that pattern is not stable on a single line. That pattern is stable within a range, although it may deviate from that range, but the overall kind of stays right there. It generally doesn't grow or shrink beyond a certain point, and it kind of maintains itself there. So I do think there is something that we can call technique, but I think that it is going to be a very, very wide and variable spectrum of things. And so, when we tell people, like, do your technique this way, do your technique that way, a lot of times what we're trying to do is coach somebody through a sticking point where they either are they're not getting quite the result they're looking for. In a martial arts context, maybe they're not getting enough power, or maybe they're throwing their balance off. Maybe that they are doing accessory motions that don't do anything to help it, like dropping your hand when your opposite hand when you punch. Maybe they're doing things that are not purposeful and not contributing to the overall thing, that are, in a sense, bleeding efficiency. So when we're teaching technique, there's a sense of there's a right way to do it, but it's really not so much that there's a single right way to do something. It's more that there's an end goal, and we have to help facilitate the student to get to that end goal in the most efficient and effective manner that they can manifest. And that necessitates tolerances for variation, and that necessitates allowing them to do it in a way that they can do, as opposed to trying to force them to do it some idealized way that only exists in mathematics or fantasy. So coming back to the fist, one of the things that I have made, and I've talked about this a bunch, I've got older videos on this, and we talk about this even with knuckle push-ups too. All that matters when you punch, really, and we're talking about front of the fist punching, boxing punching, karate punching. We're not talking about hammer fists or ridge hands or half fists or anything like that, because those all change the dynamics of what's going on. But when we're talking about a fist, there are a couple of points that we kind of want to point to that make things work. And one of those things is not clenching the fist. Clenching the fist, like closing the hand, matters because you need to get your fingers out of the way so you can hit with the knuckles. But clenching the fist, in my opinion, actually is probably going to work against you. Now, again, your conditioning, your stability, your strength, all is going to cover up for some of those theoretical deficits. But the big deal, and I don't care whether you're doing 3-knuckle punching, 2-knuckle punching, or some weird combination of things, or single knuckle punching, whatever. I don't really care about that. What I care about is that the line from the elbow to the middle knuckle, because the middle knuckle is the common denominator on the two most common styles, which is 3-knuckle and 2-knuckle. The middle knuckle is the common denominator. Yes, I think Jack Dempsey is wrong on this, even though I'm a huge Jack Dempsey fan. Straight line from the tip of the elbow to that middle knuckle. Why do I care about that? Is that because it's somehow like this or that? Not really. It's just because when you look at the way that momentum and collision mechanics work, you want more mass backing up whatever you're colliding with, or that you have compared to what you're colliding with, so that you have a better chance of transferring that force in a meaningful way into that other object. Otherwise, what happens? Either you deform, collapse, whatever, or you bounce off. And both of those are not great options. So by lining up your structure so that there's more mass behind the strike, it helps a lot. And then the other thing that I care about is that you don't have major break angle in this wrist, and it's for the same reason, right? If your wrist is canted too far one way or the other, and including your deflection angles, so flexion, rotation, deflection, so whatever that is, right? Again, we don't want that crumple zone. Again, think of like car collision mechanics. We don't want that crumple zone there to impede our force transfer or our momentum transfer in the collision, into that other body. We want as much of that momentum to transfer over into the other body as possible, as opposed to being lost to crumpling and whatnot. So those are the two big things. Is like, yes, close your hand enough to get the knuckles out of the way, keep the wrist straight, and keep the elbow in line with the middle knuckle. And for the most part, if you can kind of more or less hit those within a reasonable tolerance line, you're going to do all right. Now, we have all sorts of other things with the body mechanics of how to get to the punch, and there are various types of body mechanics for different kinds of punches and all that, right? And that's not what we're getting into. Here's the reason I don't believe in squeezing down the wrist or down the fist. And this is a big thing, and I've talked about it before, but it's when you squeeze down on your fist, right? Your index finger and your middle finger kind of just stop where they're at. Your ring and pinky finger pull those little bones out of that line, right? Out of that direct line there, right? And out of that line, which increases their potential for deflection. It's really kind of like, as an illustration, we can use something like a ruler, right? Now, this is a fairly stiff ruler, but, right, if our force is kind of directly behind it, we don't get a lot of deflection. There's some, right, because it's a flexible material and bones are way squishier than this. But it's reasonably stable, right? But if my force is still going this way, but it comes in here, ooh, look at that. It flexes quite a bit, right? Ooh, it's not a particularly springy ruler. Luckily, they're cheap. So when you pull those knuckles online and you're trying to keep everything else safe, I said online, when you pull those knuckles offline by squeezing down that fist and everything else is on a different line, you are increasing the theoretical potential for those bones to fracture, especially because they're the smaller two bones. So they have less mass and they're being thrown offline. And most people do not squarely hit with the two big knuckles. They just don't. And if you want to argue that the 3-knuckle version is inferior, well, loads and loads of people have been throwing 3-knuckle strikes for centuries and been absolutely fine with it. Jack Dempsey actually taught to hit with the ring finger, with the ring knuckle, which in my opinion was just a misattribution of what's actually going on. But again, if everything is straight in line, it matters a lot less. And as you hit somebody fleshy, you're going to end up hitting pretty much with the whole fist anyway, because their flesh is going to compress and deform. And so it really doesn't matter if you're talking a 2-knuckle or 3-knuckle strike anyway. And as I've mentioned in the past, I teach people just to aim with their middle knuckle and let the rest wash. I don't really actually care about which one. Look, if you're hitting something more rigid like a makiwara or even just a dense wall bag, then yeah, maybe you want to work both or your preferred one so that you're just kind of making your technique a little more consistent, if you consider technique to be consistent at all. But for the most part, as you hit somebody that's pretty squishy, you're going to end up hitting with the majority of your fist, the majority of the time anyway, unless you're hitting very hard things like elbows and foreheads, which you shouldn't be aiming for with your fists anyway. So that being the case, right, you can't always control which knuckles you hit with just because of the dynamic movement and everything in the fight. And so I think that trying to squeeze down and make your fist more packed is actually not always a great idea. Also, the whole idea of squeezing down and becoming tense, well, it's like throwing the brakes on and then trying to drive with the brakes on. It just makes everything a lot harder. So I'm generally not a fan of that. But again, at the end of the day, if whatever you're doing is working and you're doing it on purpose, it's fine. It's totally fine. Because at the end of the day, technique is highly variable. And I've said this before, and I will probably say it many, many more times. The variance between individuals and reps is always going to be greater than the variance between, the way that styles formally teach a technique. And that is an important thing to understand. And if you understand that, it frees you up a lot. And I'm not telling you not to do things the way that you were taught them. If that works for you, that's great. If it's not working for you, though, you should have some freedom to adjust things so that you are making things work. There is no reason to adhere to a rigid formula if you know that rigid formula can't be adhered to functionally in the first place. So I can feel myself starting to ramble, so I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share. Check us out on our other socials, and please head over to blacksunboxing.com to get a little more info, including how to contact us. Furthermore, if you are in the Phoenix area, please feel free to stop in, say hi, join in for a class, whatever. Also, if you ever see us cite sources or just for additional content, please check out our Substack. That is where we put all of the sources we use in our videos and is a major part of this. Plus, it serves as a membership platform for long distance learning and for people who would like to support us but aren't local. We would greatly appreciate it if you signed up. Even just the free membership helps us out a lot. All right, I will see you guys in the next video. Good journey.